The whole joint came to a standstill when that dog rocked up at the emergency department doors, lugging something you'd never see in a million years. Not a single person breathed as they watched the dog stride with purpose down the hallway, a little kid all covered in blood clinging weakly to its fur. That noble bugger's instinct had gone and defied all human logic, turning him into the hero no one saw coming on that grim afternoon. Before we get stuck into it, make sure you hit subscribe and tell us where you're watching from down in the comments. The usual Monday morning grind at St. Vincent's Hospital in Sydney was blown to bits when the automatic doors hissed open. A massive German shepherd, its dark coat matted with mud and blood, crossed the threshold with a steady but careful gait. What stopped everyone in their tracks wasn't just the surprise of a dog in the hospital, but what it was carrying. A little girl, looked about 6, completely out of it, her floral dress drenched in blood, her tangled blonde hair tumbling over the dog's side like a waterfall. For a second, the world just seemed to freeze. Dr. Miller was left with his stethoscope hanging midair as he was about to tuck it into his scrub pocket. Nurse Lucy dropped her clipboard, and the bang it made sounded deafening in the dead silence. At reception, Carmen, who'd been handling emergencies for 20 years, was left speechless, unable to even mutter the emergency spiel she knew off by heart. The dog didn't yap or whimper, it just kept walking with determination, like it fully understood how serious this was. Its amber eyes, smart and focused, were scanning the lobby for help. It headed straight for the main desk, leaving a trail of crimson drops on the gleaming white floor. What was most mind-blowing was how gentle it was, keeping its balance perfectly so the little girl wouldn't slip off its back. The silence in the place was so thick you could have cut it with a scalpel. Patients waiting for their turn held their breath, some instinctively grabbing their phones to film the surreal scene. Time just seemed to stand still in the normally hectic lobby, as if the whole universe was waiting for its next move. It was Teresa, a fresh out of uni nurse's aide, who broke the spell. With a muffled gasp, she sprinted towards the animal, yelling, "We need a trauma team." Now, the German shepherd, as if it knew its job was done, stopped and gently crouched down, letting Teresa's shaky hands reach the girl. The first to properly react was Lucy, a young nurse who'd only been working at the Royal Brisbane Hospital for about 6 months. Heart racing but hands steady, she slowly knelt down in front of the dog and whispered softly, "It's all right, mate. I'm here to help." The German shepherd, with its dark coat and smart eyes, let out a low growl, not from fury, but from sheer terror. Its amber eyes showed a deep exhaustion, as if it had come kilometers to get here. But it backed off just enough to let Lucy take the girl into her arms. "Oh my God, she's freezing," Lucy gasped, feeling the cold skin of the little one. The girl, who looked no older than 4, was wearing pink pajamas stained with mud and blood. Her breathing was faint, barely there. Lucy quickly checked for a pulse. It was irregular, but it was there. With the girl held tight against her chest, the nurse stood up and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Pediatric emergency." Now, the hospital staff snapped out of their collective daze. Dr. Miller, who was just finishing up his 12-hour shift, sprinted over to her, followed by 2 aides. "Prep room 3, he ordered as he took the girl from Lucy's arms. "Possible hypothermia, severe dehydration, and, wait, what's this?" As he quickly checked the little girl, he found a wound on her right leg, partly bandaged with what looked like a piece of a t-shirt. In a mad rush, the medical team wheeled the girl towards the emergency ward, pushing through the swing doors that separated reception from the restricted area. The dog tried to follow, but a security guard firmly held it back. The animal didn't fight back, it just sat by the door, its eyes locked on the tiny body it had just saved. "Someone should call the cops," the receptionist suggested, still in shock from the scene. "And maybe the RSPCA. This dog needs a checkup too." Meanwhile, Lucy stood for a moment, watching the animal. There was something in its gaze, a mix of loyalty and desperation that twisted her gut. "I promise you, we'll look after her," she said in a soft voice before running after her colleagues. The dog, as if it understood every word, lowered its head and sighed deeply, finally letting itself rest. The medical team worked like crazy. The girl lay motionless on the stretcher, her pale skin a stark contrast to the deep red staining the sheets. She was freezing, her pulse barely a whisper, and blood was still gushing from a deep gash on her side. Dr. Walsh, with 30 years of emergency experience, had never seen someone so young lose so much blood and still be alive. He adjusted his mask and, without taking his eyes off the monitors showing her increasingly weak vitals, muttered under his breath, "If we don't act now, we'll lose her." The nurses moved with pinpoint precision, hooking up blood bags, prepping surgical gear, and keeping pressure on the wound. No one spoke more than they had to. The silence in the room was only broken by the irregular beeping of the heart monitor and the doctor's sharp orders. "We need more O-negative units, stat," the head nurse shouted as another nurse prepped the area for emergency surgery. Outside the room, the dog scratched at the door, refusing to leave. Its once golden coat was stained with the same blood they were now fighting to keep inside the girl's body. Every time someone went in or out, it would poke its head in, its eyes full of a silent plea, as if it knew the girl's life was hanging by a thread. An orderly tried to move it to another area, but the animal let out a soft growl, standing its ground. "Leave him be," the security guard said. "He's not hurting anyone, and he seems to know what's going on in there." Dr. Walsh worked against the clock. His practiced hands stitched up blood vessels as he called out orders. "We need to find her parents immediately," he said without looking up. "And someone needs to figure out what happened. A wound like this isn't an accident." The youngest nurse, who had just finished her shift but stayed back after seeing the emergency, offered to check the hospital's security cameras. Maybe they caught something when the dog brought the girl in. Meanwhile, the animal kept up its silent watch. Every now and then, it would let out a low, barely audible whimper, like a canine prayer for the life it had pulled from the bush and brought to the only hands that could save it. Marina, a nurse's aide with 15 years at the hospital, had seen a lot in her time, but never anything like this. While the security guards debated what to do with the dog waiting at the entrance, she walked over to it and noticed the fierce determination in its eyes. It wasn't just some stray. There was something special about it. "Let him in," Marina said firmly, surprising everyone. The head of security, Steve, shook his head, pointing at the hospital's policy. "It's against the rules, Marina. We can't have animals on the premises," he said in his usual by-the-book tone. Marina knelt down beside the dog, gently stroking its head while looking at the small backpack it was carrying. "Look what he's done to get here. If he did all that to bring her, he deserves to be by her side," she argued, tears welling up in her eyes. "This little girl is all alone, with no family here to comfort her. Sometimes medicine isn't enough. We need something more." Her words echoed in the lobby. The guards exchanged glances, and finally Steve sighed, giving in to Marina's conviction. "All right, but he's your responsibility," he warned as he opened the access door. The moment the door opened, the dog shot in like an arrow, as if it knew the way perfectly. It didn't stop in any hallway or side room. With amazing precision, it ran straight to the room where the little girl had been taken. The doctors and nurses stepped aside, shocked by the dog's sudden appearance. The dog nimbly jumped onto the stretcher and lay down next to the unconscious girl, placing its head near her hand, without touching any of the tubes or wires connected to her. It seemed to understand the fragility of the situation perfectly. Its sharp eyes followed every move of the medical staff, every change on the monitors, as if it knew those machines were keeping its friend alive. "Unbelievable," Dr. Cooper muttered, watching the scene. "He's like a canine nurse checking her vitals." Marina smiled, wiping away her tears. "Animals get it more than we think. This dog didn't just bring medicine, he brought hope." She placed a small blanket next to the animal to make it more comfortable, knowing she had made the right call. At that moment, The monitors showed a slight but noticeable change in the girl's vitals. They were more stable. No one at the hospital had a clue who the little girl was. Her clothes were completely torn and filthy, as if she had been scrambling through the bush for hours. She had no ID in her pockets, no bracelet, not even a name tag on her clothes that could offer a single clue to who she was. The staff also checked the German Shepherd's collar, hoping to find some info to contact its owners, but all they found was a worn-out leash and a collar with no tag or microchip. It was like they had both just appeared out of nowhere. Two strangers brought together by some mysterious circumstances. "We have to figure out where they came from," Constable Evans said, jotting notes in his book. Local police wasted no time getting there and starting the investigation. The first thing they did was check the hospital's security cameras. The footage showed something extraordinary. The German Shepherd emerging from the trees bordering the back of the hospital, carrying the girl on its back with incredible care. The animal moved with a mission, as if it knew exactly where to go. It showed no signs of doubt or hesitation. It had a clear purpose. "Look at how he's carrying her," a nurse commented as they watched the footage. "It's like he's done it his whole life." The dog had perfectly adjusted its pace to keep the girl steady, slowing down when needed and occasionally stopping to make sure she didn't fall off. The people in the security room watched the footage with a mix of wonder and emotion. Even the security guard, a bloke who'd been in the job for 20 years and claimed to have seen it all, admitted he'd never witnessed anything like it. The most astonishing thing was that the animal had managed to cover what looked like several kilometers with the girl on its back. "This dog isn't just a pet," the vet who had examined him said. "His behavior shows an extraordinary level of intelligence and loyalty." While the police widened the search to the nearby bushland and started circulating the girl's image, the hospital staff couldn't stop being amazed by the determination of that four-legged, anonymous hero who, without a word, had shown more humanity than many people. They called the dog Bolt, a name that seemed to fit perfectly with the animal who had appeared like a flash of lightning in their lives, changing everything in a matter of seconds. The vet had finished treating the cat and was now watching the dog who wouldn't leave the hospital window. Its deep, alert brown eyes scanned the outside world as if it could see something the humans couldn't. Despite the staff's attempts to calm him with pats and treats, Bolt stayed on high alert, his ears pricked and his body tense. "Is he waiting for something or someone?" Maria, one of the nurses, commented as she watched the animal. "It's like he knows there's danger out there." Meanwhile, two police officers and a park ranger had started to trace the dog's origin, following the paw prints and blood trail it had left on its way to the hospital. They ventured into the thick bushland behind the building. The track led them down an increasingly tricky path, far from where hikers usually went. After nearly an hour of walking, the park ranger stopped dead in his tracks. Ahead of them, partly hidden by the vegetation, was a small wooden shack. The door was ajar, and more bloodstains marked the path to it. The three men exchanged worried looks as they drew their weapons and approached cautiously. What they found inside that shack sent a chill down their spines. The floor was covered in cages, some empty and others holding animals in terrible conditions, malnourished dogs, injured cats, and even some protected native wildlife. On a table were crude surgical tools and several jars with organs preserved in formaldehyde. It was obvious they had stumbled upon a back-alley animal trafficking ring. "Crikey," the park ranger muttered as he took photos with his phone. "This is a lot worse than we thought." In one corner, on a filthy mattress, they found a broken collar with a tag that read, "Bolt." And next to it, another, smaller collar. There was no doubt about it. The brave dog had not only escaped that hellhole, but he had also saved the little cat, sacrificing himself for it. As the officers called for backup on the radio, one of them noticed something unsettling: fresh footprints leading out of the shack. Whoever was responsible for that atrocity had been there recently and was now somewhere in the bush. Maybe, they thought with a shiver, even watching them right now. Light filtered through the branches as the search team pushed into a hidden clearing. What they found made everyone hold their breath. A makeshift camp that told a silent but terrifying story. A ripped tarp swayed slightly in the breeze, as if to point to what was underneath. The cold ashes of a campfire showed someone had been there not long ago, maybe a day or two. But what chilled the office's blood was the dark, dry stain on a fallen log, unmistakably blood. "Oh God," whispered Elena, the nurse who had insisted on coming with them. Her eyes drifted to an object glinting in the undergrowth. A mobile phone snapped in two, as if someone had deliberately stamped on it. Manuel, the officer in charge, knelt to examine it with gloves while Carlos meticulously photographed the scene. It was then that Bolt, who had been sniffing the perimeter, stopped suddenly. His behavior changed instantly. With his head low, he slowly walked towards some nearby bushes and nudged something with his nose. A small pink shoe emerged from the fallen leaves, identical to the one the girl had been wearing at the hospital. Elena let out a muffled cry, recognizing it immediately. "It's Lucis," she confirmed in a trembling voice. "It's the same one she was wearing when we found her." The tension was thick as Manuel examined the area. The evidence suggested a scenario no one wanted to say out loud. Someone had kept the girl here, possibly injured, and had tried to wipe away all traces of her presence. The bloodstain, the smashed phone, the abandoned shoe. Every piece added a darker layer to a mystery they were just starting to unravel. Bolt, as if he sensed something the humans couldn't, raised his snout to the air and let out a long, gut-wrenching howl that echoed through the trees. The primal, pain-filled sound shot through the bush like an invisible arrow, traveling for kilometers until it reached, almost like a ghostly echo, the windows of the hospital, where the little girl, Lucy, slept restlessly. In her hospital room, Dr. Martinez looked up from her notes, feeling an inexplicable shiver. Somehow, she knew they had just found something big, something that would change the course of this story for good. The nurses tried several times to get Bolt away from Lucis' bed, but the dog would just give a soft growl, refusing to move. In the end, Dr. Miller made a pretty unusual call. "Let him stay. He seems to have a special bond with her. And I've read studies about how the presence of animals can have a positive effect on patients in a critical state." The heart monitor let out a constant, monotonous beeping. Lucy stayed still, her small face pale, a contrast to the bruises that were starting to turn purple. The doctors had managed to stabilize her, but she still wasn't waking up. Her brain had suffered significant trauma in the accident, and with every hour that passed without her regaining consciousness, the odds of a full recovery went down. In the waiting room, Carmen held a cup of coffee that had long gone cold in her shaking hands. Next to her, Miguel, Lucis' granddad, prayed silently. Hospital staff walked past them with compassionate looks, but no one had any good news to share. "Why is it taking her so long to wake up?" Carmen asked a nurse who stopped to check their vitals. "The brain needs time to heal," she replied softly. "We have to be patient." In the hallway, several doctors were talking quietly as they looked at the latest test results. Their serious expressions didn't go unnoticed by the staff passing by. The case of little Lucy had touched the heart of the entire hospital. Meanwhile, in the room, Bolt rested his head near Lucy's hand, as if trying to give her his warmth and energy. Every now and then, he would gently lick her fingers, just like he had so many times when they played in the park. An orderly who came in to check her IV stopped for a moment, moved by the scene. "I've never seen such loyalty," he commented quietly. The night crept along, the hallway lights dimmed, but the activity around Lucy's room didn't stop. Every so often, a doctor would come in to check her vitals, adjust some medication, or just see if there had been any change. And their Bolt remained, motionless, watching, like a tireless guardian who refused to abandon his post. Just before dawn, a whisper broke the silence of the room. "Bolt." The dog jumped up instantly, as if he had been waiting for that moment all night. With a gentle movement, he rested his head on the edge of the hospital bed as the heart monitors started beeping faster and more often. The dog's eyes never left Lucy's face, watching for any tiny change in her expression. The girl slowly opened her eyes, blinking several times to get used to the dim light filtering through the blinds. Her parents, who had stayed up all night, rushed to her side. Carmen, with shaking hands, stroked her daughter's hair while Miguel gripped the bed rail tightly, unable to say a word. The on-duty nurse hurried in, alerted by the change in the monitors. "He saved me," Lucy murmured through tears, weakly raising her hand to touch Bolt's snout. "It was so dark and I was so scared, but he never left me for a second." Her voice, though frail, came out with a clarity no one expected after her traumatic ordeal. Dr. Walsh, who had just come in for his morning rounds, froze in the doorway. The doctor, known throughout the hospital for his stoic and professional manner, had to discreetly turn away to wipe a stubborn tear from his cheek. When he looked back at the scene, he tried to regain his professional composure, but the emotion of the moment was too powerful. "Extraordinary," the doctor commented, stepping closer to check Lucy's vitals. "Her neurological response is much better than we'd hoped. It seems having this canine hero here has been the best medicine." Bolt, oblivious to the praise, stayed completely focused on Lucy. The bond between them was almost tangible, as if they shared a secret language no one else could understand. Carmen noticed how her daughter's breathing synced with the dog's, calming each other in a silent dance of trust and protection. "I want to tell you everything," Lucy said, trying to sit up a little. "You need to know what really happened in the gorge." Her parents exchanged worried looks, but Dr. Walsh nodded, indicating he would allow a short chat as long as it didn't upset the patient too much. Trembling, Lucy held the psychologist's hand as she recounted her terrifying experience. In a broken voice, she explained that it all started when a man came to her house, introducing himself as her uncle. "Mum was at work and I was home alone. He said Mum had asked him to pick me up," the little girl whispered. Her parents were divorced, and she didn't know all her extended family, so she didn't suspect anything was off. The psychologist nodded with understanding as the girl continued. When they got to the bush, far from anyone, the man changed completely. "He suddenly started yelling horrible things," Lucy explained. "He grabbed my arm really hard and hit me when I tried to get away." Her eyes filled with tears as she remembered the terror she felt in that moment, all alone and at the mercy of a stranger. But she wasn't really alone. Bolt, who had followed Lucy's scent from her house, appeared from the trees like an unexpected guardian. "Bolt jumped and bit his leg," Lucy said with a flash of pride through her tears. "The man screamed really loud and let go of me. The kidnapper's fury then turned on the dog. He kicked Bolt several times, but the brave animal, though hurt, kept getting between the attacker and the girl. Bolt wouldn't stop barking and growling, even though he was bleeding," Lucy continued. "Then the man hit me on the head, and I don't remember anything else." According to the doctors, Lucy had suffered a concussion. What the little girl couldn't remember was that she had lost consciousness in the bush. The kidnapper, hurt and spooked by the barking that might attract attention, finally ran off, leaving her abandoned. Bolt, though badly injured, stayed with her for hours. When Lucy didn't wake up, the dog made the most important decision of his life: to go for help. With his last bit of strength, he managed to drag her to the edge of the bush and then to the road, where they eventually found the hospital. "Bolt never left me for a second," Lucy said, hugging the dog who was resting beside her bed. The psychologist watched the bond between them with admiration. That stray, that many would consider insignificant, had shown extraordinary loyalty and courage. Lucy, with a weak voice, recounted the little she could recall of that horrible experience. Between pauses to catch her breath, she explained that after the accident she was drifting in and out of consciousness. "In the moments I opened my eyes, I saw Bolt gently biting my jacket, dragging me centimeter by centimeter," she whispered as the nurses surrounded her with looks of awe. She described how the dog seemed to calculate every move, avoiding sharp branches and pointy rocks that would have made her injuries worse. "When we got to tricky spots, he'd stop. He'd look at me as if he was sizing up the situation, and then he'd choose the safest path, Lucy continued, with tears in her eyes. The most impressive thing for everyone was to hear that Bolt never gave up on his goal. Even when we went past a creek and I was dying of thirst, he wouldn't let us stop, she added, stroking the fur of her savior, who was still lying next to the stretcher, refusing to leave her side. Dr. Walsh, who had been listening in silence, finally stepped in with a serious voice. "I'm not exaggerating when I say this is a miracle," he said as he checked Lucy's vitals again. "With the amount of blood you lost and the seriousness of your injuries, if you had arrived 30 minutes later, we'd be telling a different story." The doctor knelt down to pat Bolt, an unusual gesture for the normally formal surgeon. "This dog not only brought you to us, but he did it in the most careful way possible, minimizing the damage during the journey." The nurses had already set up a small corner for Bolt with fresh water and some leftovers from the canteen. Marissa, the head nurse, had even put a sign on the door that read, "Canine Hero Resting." For the hospital staff, used to seeing daily tragedies, this story was a ray of hope, a reminder that in the darkest moments, unconditional loyalty and love can make the difference between life and death. Meanwhile, Bolt remained vigilant, as if his job wasn't over yet. The Australian Federal Police launched an immediate search operation. Inspector Reynolds, with 20 years of experience in abduction cases, was personally coordinating the investigation while reviewing the hospital's security footage. The cameras had captured a slim man running away a few minutes after Bolt had come in with Lucy. "He's heading towards Central Station," an officer confirmed after analyzing his movements on several local cameras. What the kidnapper didn't know was that Sydney had activated a full alert. Every station, every exit from the city was being watched. The suspect's face was already on the phones of every officer on duty. He was carrying a worn-out black backpack that, according to witnesses at the camp, wasn't his. "We have visual confirmation at Central," a plainclothes officer radioed. "He's buying a ticket to Melbourne, Platform 4. The man nervously looked around as he waited in line, unaware that 3 undercover officers had him surrounded. When he tried to go through security, he felt a firm hand on his shoulder. "Federal Police, you're under arrest," he heard before 2 officers pinned him to the ground. When they searched his backpack, they found a small rag doll with a faded blue dress. It was Lucy's inseparable companion since she was 3. They also found a smashed mobile phone that the technicians at the camp immediately recognized as the emergency device they kept in the main shack. "Why'd you do it?" the inspector asked while the suspect stayed silent in the interrogation room. The man, identified as Nathan Jones, 32, kept his eyes on the table. His record showed a history of psychiatric issues and a string of temporary jobs at children's camps all over the state. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the doctors confirmed that Lucy was out of the woods. The little girl had asked for Bolt several times. "I want to see my hero," she insisted in a weak voice. Her parents, who hadn't left her side for a second, exchanged a knowing look. They knew exactly what they had to do to thank the dog who had saved their daughter's life. The news spread like a bushfire in summer. Within hours, the entrance of St. Raphael's Hospital had turned into a hive of activity. Dozens of reporters with their cameras and microphones were crammed at the main entrance, while people from all over the city came to try and catch a glimpse of the now famous canine hero. The dog who crossed the city bleeding to save a girl. Read the headlines of the local news. Some national channels had sent reporters, and on social media, the hashtag #BoltTheHero had become a nationwide trend. Inside the hospital, oblivious to his sudden fame, Bolt stayed lying by Lucy's bed. Dr. Mendoza had made an exception to the hospital rules, allowing the animal to stay in the room. "This dog has earned that right," he had said firmly when the nurse supervisor questioned the decision. Camera flashes sometimes snuck through the window when a photographer managed a good angle from outside, but Bolt didn't even blink. His attention was completely focused on the small figure breathing softly under the white sheets. The connection between them was almost palpable. Every time Lucy tossed and turned in her sleep or showed signs of discomfort, Bolt's ears would prick up instantly. His amber eyes never left the girl's face, and he would let out soft whimpers, as if trying to tell her she wasn't alone, that he was still there watching over her. Nurse Carmela, who'd been working in pediatrics for 30 years, admitted to her colleagues that she had never seen such devotion. "It's like he knows exactly what she needs," she commented, watching Bolt gently rest his head on the edge of the bed when Lucy unconsciously reached out for contact. "He won't even move to eat if she seems to need him close." Dr. Jimenez, who was passing by to check Lucy's vitals, stopped for a moment at the door, moved by the scene. That dog, who had risked his own life to save his little owner, was now her most loyal guardian during her recovery. No camera, no applause, no award seemed to matter to Bolt. In his world, only Lucy existed. The hospital, which had once felt like a sterile, detached place, underwent a remarkable transformation in the days that followed. The corridors, which were usually filled with the sound of monitors and medical chatter, now occasionally echoed with exclamations of affection when Bolt walked by with his owner. It was as if that stray had broken an invisible barrier between the medical staff and the rest of the world. Nurses who normally stuck to the rulebook would now stop to pat Bolt's back. Some even saved bits of their lunch to offer him during his scheduled visits. The doctors, in their immaculate white coats, would kneel without a second thought to scratch the dog's ears, momentarily forgetting the hospital's hierarchy. The most surprising thing was how the patients reacted. Those who could move constantly asked about the four-legged angel, as someone had spontaneously christened him. The kids on the pediatric ward drew pictures of Bolt, some with wings and a halo, decorating a special notice board dedicated to his heroic deed. Even the most seriously ill patients seemed to find a moment of peace when they were told the story of the hero dog. One afternoon, while Miguel was waiting outside Lucy's room during a checkup, Carmen, a 65-year-old nurse who had worked at that hospital for over 4 decades, approached silently. She knelt beside Bolt, ignoring the creak of her own knees, and began to stroke him with hands that had held thousands of patients throughout her career. Her eyes, framed by wrinkles that spoke of countless night shifts, teared up slightly. "You know something?" she whispered to Bolt as if he could understand her perfectly. "I've seen doctors perform technical miracles. I've seen technology save impossible lives. But what you did..." She paused, looking around to make sure no one else was listening. "Thank you for reminding us what true courage is. Sometimes, with so many rules and machines, we forget that the instinct to protect others is the purest thing that exists." Bolt, as if he understood the weight of those words, gently rested his head on Carmen's lap, while the media frenzy continued to unfold around his story, oblivious to this small moment of genuine connection. The sun was barely up when a white social services van pulled up outside the hospital. 2 workers got out with folders and professional expressions, but their eyes gave away their passion. Lucy's situation had moved all the medical staff, and now they had to take her to a temporary care center while her case was investigated, and they looked for family who could take her in. When they entered the room, they found the little girl asleep, hugging Bolt, who lifted his head, alert, as if he knew exactly what was about to happen. "G'day, Lucy," one of the workers said softly when the girl woke up. "We've come to take you somewhere you'll be safe." Lucy's expression changed instantly. Her eyes filled with tears as she hugged Bolt tighter. "I don't want to go anywhere without him," she murmured. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but we can't take dogs to the center," the other worker explained, trying to sound sympathetic. It was then that Lucy, with a surprising determination for her age, clung to Bolt's neck and burst into heart-wrenching sobs. "I'll only go if he comes with me. I'll only go if he comes with me," she repeated through desperate hiccups. The dog, as if understanding every word, licked the girl's tears and then looked at the workers with eyes that seemed to plead. Dr. Mendez, who had come in after hearing the commotion, approached the professionals. "That dog saved her life," she reminded them in a low voice. "He's the only familiar thing she has left right now." The social workers exchanged looks, clearly moved but caught between protocol and human compassion. One of them went outside to make a call, while the other tried to calm Lucy, who was still clinging to Bolt as if he were her last lifeline in the middle of a storm. After a few minutes that felt like forever, the worker came back with a small smile. "We've spoken to the center's director," she announced. "We'll make an exception. Bolt can come with you, Lucy. At least until we sort out your situation." The girl's face lit up instantly, as if someone had turned on a light in her darkness. Bolt, almost as if he knew they had won a big battle, wagged his tail with renewed energy. "Really?" Lucy asked, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Really," the worker confirmed. "Now, will you help us get your things ready?" The first few nights at the foster home were especially tough for Lucy. She'd lie in that unfamiliar bed, surrounded by walls she didn't recognize, and stay awake for hours. The night noises made her jump, the creak of the floorboards, the wind against the window, the muffled voices of other kids who, like her, had come there seeking refuge. But there was a constant presence that transformed that alien space into something close to home. Bolt. The dog, true to his silent promise, slept by her bed every night like a tireless sentry. "Are you awake, Bolt?" Lucy would whisper in the dark. The dog would respond by slightly lifting his head, his eyes shining in the gloom. Only then, listening to the rhythmic, deep breathing of the animal, could the girl close her eyes and fall asleep. Carmela White, the center's director, watched this dynamic with a mix of awe and emotion. In her 20 years running the foster home, she had seen many tough cases, but Lucis had touched her deeply. The transformation she was going through thanks to Bolt was remarkable. "It's like they've made a secret pact," Carmela commented to one of the carers as they watched Lucy brushing Bolt's fur in the garden. 2 weeks ago she barely spoke. And look at them now. Lucis' laughter, a sound that seemed to have been lost on that terrible night of the accident, was starting to be heard again. First there were shy smiles, then little giggles when Bolt got up to mischief, and finally, open, genuine laughs that lit up the whole center. The bond between the girl and the dog went beyond any conventional human-pet relationship. They had shared the darkest moment. They had walked together on the edge of the abyss and had come back transformed, but fundamentally intact. Where Lucy found comfort, Bolt found purpose. Where the dog offered unconditional protection, the girl gave pure, unrestrained love. Some bonds are forged in fire, Carmela mused one afternoon as she watched them play. And those are the ones that never break. The police worked tirelessly in parallel with Lucis' recovery. After analyzing the evidence collected from where Bolt had found the girl, they identified the kidnapper as Nathan Jones, a 42-year-old man with a record for similar crimes in Victoria and Queensland. The most shocking discovery was that he didn't act alone. "We're dealing with an organized network that has been operating for at least 7 years in different states," explained Police Commissioner Fernandez at a press conference. Lucis' case was the missing piece we needed to connect another 20 cases of missing children that were unsolved. The hideout where Bolt had found Lucy turned out to be just one of 5 places the organization used to hold the kids temporarily. Thanks to Bolt's hairs found on other children's clothing and the fabric fibers the dog had brought back on his fur, investigators were able to make connections that had seemed impossible before. In less than a week, Operation Canine Guardian, named in honor of Bolt, managed to free 4 more children and arrest 7 members of the network. 3 families, who had had no news of their little ones for over 2 years, were finally reunited with them. What that dog did not only saved Lucy, but it has started a domino effect that is dismantling one of the most dangerous rings we have ever faced, commented Judge Martinez, in charge of the case. National media covered every development of the investigation. Animal behavior experts were interviewed to explain Bolt's extraordinary instinct, while child psychologists highlighted the importance of the bond between children and their pets. "Dogs can detect signs of danger that we humans miss," explained Dr. Ramirez, a vet specializing in canine behavior. But what Bolt did goes beyond instinct. It shows exceptional emotional intelligence and a capacity for planning. For Elena and Carlos, Lucy's parents, every piece of news about another child being rescued was an added comfort. Their personal tragedy had helped save others. And although the trauma would linger, they found comfort in knowing that their story had led to justice for so many families. We never imagined that our stray, who we picked up from a rescue center 3 years ago, would become the hero who would dismantle a criminal network. Carlos confessed as he stroked Bolt, who was resting peacefully next to Lucy's hospital bed. The whole city rallied like never before. While Lucy was recovering, hundreds of letters started arriving at the hospital, all addressed to the girl and her furry hero. Neighbors from the area, moved by the story that was all over the local news, organized spontaneous fundraisers. Soon, Lucy's room looked like a toy shop. Stuffed animals, kids' books, and colorful blankets were piled up in every corner. "I never thought so many people would care about us," Teresa whispered with tears in her eyes as she arranged the gifts. The well-known bakery, Sweet Home, in the town square, made special bone-shaped cookies for Bolt, decorated with his name in blue icing. The owner insisted on delivering them personally. "This dog has taught us more about humanity than a lot of people," he commented, patting Bolt's head, who wagged his tail with moderate enthusiasm, as if he understood the importance of the moment but without losing his canine dignity. The hospital, not wanting to be left out, decided to hold a small but emotional ceremony in the inner garden. The director of the medical center, a normally serious and by-the-book woman, smiled widely as she held a medal of honor specially designed for the occasion. In recognition of an act of extraordinary courage, she read with a breaking voice before placing it around Bolt's neck. The medal shone under the afternoon sun, wrapped in a sky-blue ribbon that matched Lucy's eyes. The nurses and doctors who had treated the girl formed a semicircle, applauding with genuine admiration. Even some patients leaned out of their windows to witness the moment. Bolt, for his part, remained seated with an almost human dignity, as if he fully understood that the recognition symbolized something much bigger than himself. The hospital days were left behind like a bad memory that faded with each sunrise. Now Lucy and Bolt enjoyed long walks in the local park, where the trees offered generous shade and the grass looked like an endless green carpet. For the faithful Labrador, there was no greater reward than seeing his little friend smile again. That smile, which for weeks had been hidden behind sadness and pain, now shone with the intensity of the midday sun. "You know, Bolt, you're the best dog in the whole world," Lucy would tell him as they sat together on their favorite bench. The animal would wag his tail with excitement, as if he understood every word perfectly. The girl had not only regained her health but also that spark of joy that defined her before the accident. Old Mrs. Green watched from a distance, her eyes moist with emotion. The doctors had said that her psychological recovery would be just as important as the physical one, and Bolt was doing wonders on that front. The grandmother gratefully remembered that day in the emergency room when everyone was frozen after seeing the dog walk in with her granddaughter's backpack. On their daily walks, Lucy and Bolt had become local celebrities. Neighbors greeted them, kids wanted to pat the canine hero, and even the bakery owner always saved a special piece of bread for him. Life was getting back to normal, though it was forever changed by the experience. Sometimes, when no one else could hear her, Lucy would lean into Bolt's ear and whisper her most private thoughts, her fears that still lingered, and her dreams for the future. She'd tell him how she wanted to be a vet one day to help animals like him, or how she still sometimes had nightmares about the accident. The dog would look at her with his brown eyes full of understanding, as if he could absorb all her fears. "As long as you're with me, I'll never be scared," the girl would confess, stroking his golden fur. And it was true. Bolt's presence had turned fear into courage, loneliness into company, and pain into hope. With every walk, every game, every moment shared, a bond was strengthened that went far beyond the relationship between a girl and her pet. It was a connection that had saved 2 lives in ways neither of them could ever explain in words. The hospital was never the same after that Monday. Every corner seemed to hold the echo of those canine footsteps that had changed everything. The nurses told the story to new residents during their first days, and it quickly became part of the Royal General Hospital's folklore. Even the director, a serious man who rarely showed emotion, had a small commemorative plaque placed at the emergency entrance. As the months went by, Lucy recovered completely. Her granddad officially adopted Bolt, who now sported a red collar with a shiny tag and an official registration. Every month, they both visited the hospital, bringing homemade cookies for the staff. Bolt, always well-behaved, walked through the corridors as if he perfectly understood his role as a local celebrity. The most surprising thing was the change in the community. Inspired by the story, the local council improved the lighting in the park where the accident happened and started a stray dog adoption program. The story made national news, and soon other hospitals started implementing special protocols for pets accompanying patients in emergencies. Whenever someone at the hospital felt doubtful or scared about a difficult situation, all a veteran team member had to say was, "Remember Bolt and Lucy." Those words had become a secret code that meant even in the darkest moments, there was always hope and courage to find solutions. Dr. Martinez, who had treated Lucy that night, started formally studying the bond between humans and animals, publishing several scientific papers on the subject. And although life went on with new stories and daily challenges, no one ever forgot the day an anonymous dog defied fate and taught everyone that love and courage don't understand species or limits. Bolt, without even knowing it, had left an indelible mark, not just on the hospital floor tiles but on the heart of a whole city. If this story touched your heart, just imagine how many more we still have to share. Subscribe to Animal Stories channel, hit the bell icon, and join us for every new episode of courage, loyalty, and second chances. Because every life deserves to be remembered.